No one could save a lonely, dying old man if not for this dog. Brian Myers knew he was in trouble when he fell to the floor. He had no feeling on his left side and couldn't stand up in the crawl space between his bed and the wall. It was really frightening. I couldn't get up and I didn't realize at that moment that I'd had a stroke, he said. My cell phone was on the dresser about 15 feet away, but there was no way I could get to it. Seconds later, Myers, 59, felt something wet and rough on his face, his dog's tongue. Sadie, the 100-pound German Shepherd he had rescued from an animal shelter near his Teaneck, New Jersey home last fall, was standing above him with a look of concern on her face, he said. She kept licking me and crying, so I reached my hand up to pet her, then I grabbed her collar, recalled Myers, who had gone to bed just 2 hours before he fell on the evening of January 16. He was stunned by what happened next, he said. Sadie backed up and began pulling Myers inch by inch out of the crawl space and then wiggled toward his dresser. She was not raised as a service dog, but she was in distress over what was happening and she could tell I was in trouble, he said. I don't know how she did it, but she knew. 5 minutes later, he was in front of his dresser and was able to reach up about 3 feet with his right arm and retrieve his cell phone to call for help, Myers said. At Englewood Health Hospital that night, Myers was given an MRI that revealed he'd suffered a stroke. Doctors told him it was likely that his four-legged companion had saved his life. It was the best decision I'd ever made to adopt her, said Myers, who came home last month and has much of his mobility back thanks to physical therapy. I really feel it was meant to be. Another serious illness led him to adopt Sadie, a dog that nobody else seemed to want, at the Ramapo Bergen Animal Refuge in Oakland, New Jersey last September. Myers is retired and lives alone. He felt lonesome and scared after he came down with COVID-19 early on during the pandemic last March, he said. I decided it would be a good idea to get a dog after all the time I'd sat in my house by myself, Myers said. I'd had a rescue dog before, but I had to put him down a couple of years ago. I was ready for another one. About 6 months after he'd recovered from the coronavirus, a friend who is familiar with the Ramapo Bergen Animal Refuge emailed him a photo of Sadie, and he was immediately intrigued, Myers said. Sadie had been identified by the shelter as hard to place because of her aggressive behavior. Myers made an appointment to visit the dog, and on the appointed day, Sadie was brought outside of the sanctuary's play area. The refuge often accepts dogs such as Sadie that are rejected by other shelters because they can't get adopted due to behavior issues, said Megan Brinster, Ramapo Bergen's executive director. Staff workers and volunteers train the animals in the hope that bad behaviors can be eliminated and make them more adoptable, she said. Sadie exhibited aggression towards men, Brinster said, and visitors to the animal refuge were often intimidated by her large size and loud bark. The 6-year-old German Shepherd wasn't a good fit for most homes, and she'd been sent away by 3 animal shelters because of her behavior before she ended up at the no-kill sanctuary last June, she added. She's very protective and anxious in a kennel situation, Brinster said. When she doesn't want someone in her space, she'll make herself look big and start barking. But after Brian put in his application, we thought, let's give him a chance. Within minutes of meeting, Sadie and Myers were playing fetch with a ball, and he was able to take her out for a walk, Brinster said. It was an inspiring thing to watch. They were this amazing match, she said. It was clear they were ready to go. When I first saw Sadie, I thought, wow, that's one big dog, Myers recalled. I believe that her size is one of the reasons they had a problem placing her. When the adoption papers were finalized, he loaded her into the back seat of his car and drove directly to a pet store to buy a big bag of dog food, some chew bones, a squeaky toy, and a dog bed. Shortly after Myers let Sadie inside the house, she stood on her hind legs, put her paws on his shoulders, and licked his face, he said. On their first night together, Myers discovered that Sadie's idea of happiness involved ditching the new dog bed and taking over his own. She'd start out on the pillow next to mine, but end up sleeping at the foot of the bed, he said. It became a routine. I thought after all she's been through, who am I to deny her the pleasure of sleeping in a bed? In December, when Myers came down with COVID-19 a second time, doctors telling him he'd been exposed to a second variant, he said Sadie stayed by his side in his bed until he felt better. Weeks later, he stood up in the night to walk to the restroom and his legs buckled. Myers' doctor later told him that his stroke was brought on by blood clots due to COVID-19. When he was released from a rehab center on February 9th, his brother brought Sadie for a reunion in the parking lot. In the parking lot that day, he said he wept as Sadie jumped into his lap and smothered him with sloppy kisses.